Ito po ang fourth episode ng ating Season 3. Week 30 na po tayo of the 52 weeks na preparation natin for the 500th anniversary of our Catholic faith in the Philippines. Di ba? We want to be grateful, but we want also to share the faith. Pag-usapan natin ngayon uli kung sino si Jesucristo, the Incarnate Son. Let's listen to the Word of God. Maiksi lang po from the letter of St. Paul to the Galatians.
But when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to ransom those under the law, so that we might receive adoption. As proof that you are children, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a child, and if a child, then also an heir through God.
Galatia. Hindi po ito isang lugar lang eh. It's a region, ika nga, no? So kita po natin sa mapa ang different missionary journeys ni St. Paul. Paikot-ikot lang po, around that area. Kaya, meron siyang sulat to the Galatians. At dito niya na-reveal talaga the very mystery of the Trinity, di ba? Fullness of time sent His Son. Tapos, the Son, God sent the Spirit of His Son to our hearts para we could say, Abba, Father. Yon. Now, i-consider po natin yon very well. Sino ba tong sinusulatan ni St. Paul? Kundi kasama niya daw si St. Luke. Sabi niya, huwag niyo sanang makakaligtaan. Sino kayo? You are no longer a slave, but a child. Bakit ito nangyari? Kasi God the Son, the only Son of the Father, became man. Alam niyo, sabi ng marami, time, kita niyo yung time na yan? Ang ganda po ng way. Yung time na yan, ang pumasok sa time was eternity. Nagpakumbaba ang Diyos Ama na ipadala ang mismo niyang anak na Diyos, one God with Him. And yet, napasakop sa oras. Eternity entered into time. This is what we would call the humility of God. And what is this eternity in time? We know that all things work for the good of those who love God. Bakit? Those He loved, He predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. And being predestined, He called them to be sanctified, justified. And bakit? To be glorified. Ano ang glory natin? In the same way that His Son is the glory of the Father. Not just because He is on the cross, but He says, our glory is this God who is for us, and not therefore no one can be against us. If He did not spare His only Son. He handed us to us all. So, sino po ang magdududa na we shall be defeated and conquered by anything? Fullness of time. Yan po ang binigay sa atin ng Diyos. Kaganapan po ng panahon. Nung dumating ang kanyang anak, the Incarnate Son, nagganap na ang kanyang kagustuhang mangyari sa buong sanlibutan. The glory of being called children of God. Si Dorothy Day po pala, a nice woman, a Catholic woman, she was famous for singing this, Que Sera Sera. When I was but a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. Di ba? Whatever will be, the future is not ours to see. Tapos na naman yung second stanza, When I grew up, I fell in love. This time I asked my sweetheart, what lies ahead? Will we have rainbows? My sweetheart said, whatever will be, will be. Aba, naging lola na siya. I have children of my own. They asked their mother, what will I be? Will I be handsome? Will I be rich? I told them tenderly, whatever will be, will be. Imagine po, 3 generations, pareho po ang kanta, que sera, sera. What a pain if we do not know that in Jesus, the future is already certain. Bawat lalaki, bawat babae po, every man and woman, every girl and boy, they have the opportunity. And what is the opportunity? The potential. Bakit? Heirs like Christ. Whoever believes in the only Son is the child of that one Father, then he will receive a grace replacing grace as we have seen before in the prologue of John. Therefore, meron magandang storya. It's a bit long pero maganda po eh. You see there, a wealthy man, meron siyang anak, very devout, sa kanyang passion. Anong passion nila? Collecting artwork. They went all around the world. Very wealthy to, bilyonaryo. They got a Picasso. They got a Van Gogh. Imagine. They even had a Claude Monet. Wow. And to the satisfaction of the old man, no, this son of his was being able to train his eyes to know what is a very good painting. Pero war came in, and the young man had to leave his father. But then, just a few short weeks after he left, may telegram. Missing in action ng anak mo. Wow. The art collector waited. The fear that he would not see his son again. And his fears were confirmed. The young man died as he was rushing a fellow soldier to a doctor. So the old man, alone, widow na siya, ito lang kanyang anak, became lonely, distressed, distraught. Patating na po ang Pasko. On Christmas morning, knock-knock. And this old man was awakened by that long knock, and when he walked to the door, no, the masterpieces behind him just reminded him of a son no longer coming home. Lo and behold, there was a soldier with a large package in his hand. Ano yun? I was a friend of your son. I was the one he was rescuing when he died. Siya pala, yung dinala ng anak ng milyonaryong ito to the doctor and saved him actually. Sabi niya, pwede po ba ako makapasok? I have something to show you. And when the two of them began to talk, not to mention about the love for fine art. Sabi niya, you know, sir, I'm not an artist, pero I want to give you this. And the old man unwrapped the package. It revealed a portrait, the portrait of his son. Sabi nila, the world will never consider the work of this soldier, of this young man, as a masterpiece of Van Gogh or Picasso or Monet. Definitely. But overcome with emotion, the millionaire thanked the soldier, promising to hang the picture over the fireplace. Naglaho po ang panahon. True to his word, the painting went well above the fireplace. And he was talking about this person. And then, weeks followed, ang laki pala ng ginawa ng kanyang anak. No? Ang dami nagkwekwento sa kanya, the gallantry. No? He would learn his son rescued dozens of wounded soldiers until a bullet stilled his caring heart. So his fatherly pride and satisfaction eased the pain of grief. And now the painting of his son became the prized possession. Nawalan po ng gana siya sa mga art pieces na kanyang nakolekta, and he always told his neighbor that this was the greatest gift he ever received. Sad, the old man died. He passed away the following spring after that winter. Alam niyo nangyari? The art world was in anticipation. Bakit? Oh, sino? I-auction pala lahat ng paintings. No? They did not mind whatever happened to that story of that soldier that gave the painting. According to the will of the old man, all of the artworks would have to be auctioned on the next Christmas day, the day he received the greatest gift. And then the day arrived. So it was spring, 9 months after. Therefore, all the people with their money were willing to say, I will get one of those collections. Imagine, these are great paintings, no? And the auction began. Pero it began with the painting of the man's son. He said, oh, magkano ba to? Who will open the bid with $100? Yan, yung painting ng anak na yan. Wala sumasagot. Who cares about the painting? Just a picture of his son. Forget it. Let's go on with the better stuff. Sabi niya, no, we have to sell this one first, said the auctioneer. Who will take the son? Finally, a friend said, alam niyo, I have only $10 for the painting. That's all I have. But I knew that boy. Can I have it? And it went, gone. Said, sold to the man in the back for $10. You know what surprised them? The auction is over. The man who took the son gets everything. $10. Alam nyo, stunned disbelief quieted the room. Someone spoke up and asked, what do you mean it's over? We didn't come here for a picture of some old guy's son. What about all of those paintings? Millions of dollars. We demand an explanation. Sabi niya, well, it's very simple. According to the will of the Father, whoever takes the Son gets it all. Whoever takes the Son gets it all. Whoever takes the Son gets it all. Good story. Do you remember? For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son. But whoever believes, $10 lang, oh, whoever believes will not perish, he gets it all. Eternal life. Yan po ang ibig sabihin pag nakilala natin si Jesucristo, the incarnate Son. I found a young man and he will tell us how come Jesus is for him getting it all. Pakinggan natin siya.
One thing about growing up is that you begin to think about your childhood. You begin to think about it partly because you're really quite removed from it already. It's a lot easier to talk about because it's already done. It no longer has that element of uncertainty that only comes with the present. Your childhood is now a narrative. As a young man growing into adulthood, I sometimes contemplate on my childhood. The temptation is too great at times to go back and live forever in that time, a simpler time in life when everything was provided for, friends were easy to see, school was the most of my concerns, and a time when creativity, imagination, and energy were boundless. But I avoid spending too much time contemplating on my childhood because it rather quickly becomes irresponsible daydreaming, running away from the responsibilities that come with the natural course of life, running away from the demands of the present. The warmth and laughter of the family and the extended family, a very Filipino thing, with the presence of my cousins and my grandparents and relatives, are the backdrop of my formative years. And those were just so much fun. And I understand that not everyone has this sort of childhood, and perhaps that makes it difficult or even painful to go back to this time in their lives. But like every family, there's the drama and the imperfections. But as a child and as an adolescent, I always felt that I was introduced to the less than ideal realities of the world in a manner that was always appropriate for my age. And during this time, that which I could not confide in my family, or would not confide in my family, I entrusted to my friends and God. So my childhood was great. All my needs were met. My parents had little difficulty meeting my reasonable wants. I had great friends whom I share friendship with to this day, achieved well enough in school, didn't fall into vices, and as I transitioned further into the last years of my adolescence, I began attending university where I had dreamed to. At the back of my mind, however, there was this fear that life had peaked or was approaching the peak. Life was already so good, and I didn't really want to grow up because, as I did, I realized that growing up is a tiring thing. Family and friends let you down at some point. You inevitably struggle with school or work. You no longer enjoy hobbies like you used to. It gets harder to lose weight. And on top of that, as you inherit the world, you also inherit its oftentimes overwhelming problems. And there's that great temptation to concede, to accept that the past will always be better, and to drag ourselves to the end, always proclaiming that those were the good old days. And perhaps to many that sounds rich, that a 24-year-old like myself would speak as if I had gone through the entirety of life. But I'm sure the struggle of letting go of my childhood and acceptance of the past are struggles that have bothered us all. It's hard to know what it's like to be a kid and not be one anymore. But that's the way forward, to accept that the past has gone, we cannot live in it, and we cannot change it. I believe that when one is coming of age, particularly during the conventional years in university, it is crucial to reflect on the question of growing independence and individual freedom. There is a freedom seemingly exclusive to a child or one who is childlike, characterized by boundless energy, enthusiasm, hope, and the innocence of ideals. On the other hand, there is a freedom exclusive to an adult, choosing where to steer the direction of one's life as vocation. And in my opinion, a university or the early professional life serves as the bridge between the two for most people. And like most people, I've been struggling and enjoying the experience. You only ever get to experience things for the first time once, and so I welcome most experiences, good and bad, with a sense of observation, curiosity, excitement, and humor. My approach to university and work have been simple: perform well enough to have an attractive resume, fulfill my responsibility as a friend towards others, actively pursue meaningful work, get enough sleep, and have fun. It's always dangerous when any one of these aspects becomes more important than the others. Too much self care can become harmful denial of the trials of the world. Too much work is absolutely no way to live. And too much fun is denial of responsibility. And the university and work have taught me the importance of giving these aspects their appropriate dues. and the university provided me with the resources to better appreciate the value of truth and the pursuit of it by question. I've always taken the intellectual rigor of questions seriously. So, as you can expect, religion, faith, and the concept of God or higher beings has always brought question marks and asterisks. For me, especially when I was younger, when I was less capable of understanding concepts of the higher knowledge, concepts like truth, love, and the good. Fair to say, it's not easy to believe that which cannot easily be seen nor witnessed firsthand. It is not easy to believe in love when we've seen and experienced abuse and violence. But I've always believed in a higher being, and I did a fair amount of exploring the knowledge of ideas not of my own, wisdom of philosophies I do not subscribe to, and tenets of religions I do not believe in. We all have this period of time in our lives when we question, explore, and ultimately try to answer deep, meaningful questions about our existence. This period of life can be brief or it can last a lifetime. Some people can find God very early on in their lives, others in the middle of it, and some towards the end. Some will even try to deny or ask questions in an attempt to disprove God, in an attempt to put meaning into their lives as being undisputed captains of their own ship. But a relationship with God is unique. It is as unique as its course and its timing. And I respect that affair as one being personal and private. At best, perhaps, as a teenager, I was, you may say, an obedient skeptic. I did most things because I wanted to obey my parents. It's certainly not a bad thing, but it's also not enough. And the reading I had to reflect on for this dialogue was mostly about how the function of our actions ought to be love rather than mere obedience, and certainly more than the concept of a reward system. Now, that respect for timing and consent to a relationship, in a relationship, are essential to the respect for others' freedom. While it's certainly true that we are all related to God, we manifest this relationship in different ways. And this relationship, like any, is born out of love, and freedom precisely is necessary for love. Now, these difficult questions about ourselves, life, and God are worth pursuing. For in the end, they also yield satisfying answers. And so I pursue, and I encourage you to do the same. My pursuit reached a critical point during my first year in university. I had taken up units in Theology 101. In this class, religion and God and the knowledge of them was taken seriously for perhaps the first time in my life. None of the cheesy, purely emotional fluff aided by an acoustic guitar. Now, that's not a bad way to learn about God, but it's not for me. I demanded intellectually satisfying answers to my questions, answers that would also at least be compatible with the natural sciences. Skepticism and denial, tied by years of so-so Christian living classes, half-baked catechism, hypocrisy from Catholics, and bad homilies, even a few ones from Father Francis, were undone in a matter of weeks by a serious sit-down and discussion of the Catholic faith. The faith and my own faith were put through the intellectual rigor of question which I had secretly demanded for so long, and my Theo professor delivered. And from there it snowballed. I pursued my then theology professor for a private chat to ask about other things related to the Catholic faith. That private chat continued and became a weekly meeting with a friend to discuss the faith and life. For the first time in my life, a priest became a person, not just in the sense that persons are fallible, and we are guilty of that sometimes, of holding a religious to an unfair demand of perfection, but in the sense that he could be my friend and that I could confide in him my concerns, matters of my personal life, and banter. At another point in the middle of my stay in university, I was exposed to the rich history of the Catholic faith and its being intertwined with the history of the Philippines, as I took up units in Philippine history, Philippine society, and Rizal. It is a history that is sometimes violent, sometimes peaceful, sometimes beautiful, and sometimes ugly. But that is the reality of life, that it is not one dimensional, and that is history, events in the past that we cannot change, cannot deny, and we can only properly learn from if we read it critically and fairly through multiple lenses. It is unreasonable to judge the past and its figures merely by the present standards, lest we forget people are also a product of their times, not merely by their own agency. And this dive into history was not only an exciting discussion on our culture, it also prompted me to reflect on my identity as a young Filipino Catholic in the 21st century. And I have to say, it's really quite a unique spot to be in. Admittedly, despite all of this reflection and all this richness, exposure to the history of the Philippines and its people, I generally dislike being a Filipino. There are just more aspects to our culture I disagree with than I deem appropriate to share publicly, and difficulties come from being represented by weak documents, and I also don't feel quite at home in Manila, nor anywhere else for that matter, not yet at least. And while I acknowledge and appreciate the desirable traits of the Filipino people and the beauty of the Philippines' natural resources, I dislike living in a tropical climate. I've never been one to go to the beach, and having been born and raised in Manila, I just think it's quite ugly. And as a result, I've always had a wandering eye for living abroad. This yearning to experience life elsewhere and to find a sense of belonging brought me to the city of Rome in Italy. Developments in my career aligned well enough with my preferences and resources to put me in the city. At this point, my perspectives on responsibility and accountability were, I felt, mature enough to give me the confidence to spend time alone abroad without running the risk of simply messing about. Running away from the responsibilities of adulthood, spending an extended holiday, and squandering my parents' financial support. Now, during my first year in Rome, the Pope Francis, celebrated the first Simbang Gabi at St. Peter's Basilica, the seat of the Roman Catholic Church. Of course, the whole Filipino community throughout Italy flocked to the capital to attend Mass. And to my surprise, everyone was quite early. And as a result, I spent a good amount of time waiting in line to get into the basilica. Now, I did not make it inside in time, so I attended the service right outside the basilica. I was also unfortunately dressed assuming I would make it inside, so I was just outside, European winter evening, freezing. It was pretty cold. And so the celebration began. And as the celebration began, you could begin to feel the gravity of history in that moment. You take a glance behind you, and you are in the embrace of Bernini's columns, the beauty of Rome and the Old World. You look to your right, St. Paul. You look to your left, St. Peter, two stalwarts of the Catholic Church. You look towards the Apostolic Palace, the loving gaze of our Mother. You look atop the Basilica, the Apostles and Christ, the promise of happiness. If there was ever an image one would ascribe to the words overwhelming and majestic, this was it. I began to think about my family and friends back in Manila whom I would not be with for Christmas for the first time. I began to think about the people in Rome who became my family. I began to think about my simple place in history. Why am I here? How did I get here? And in dramatic fashion, the choir filled St. Peter's Square with Filipino Catholic Mass songs. Now, I still cannot properly describe the depth nor significance of that moment as much as I'd want to. It is as if God had wanted me to be there at the exact time and place, and for once, I actually obliged. Perhaps in that moment I understood, if only for a while, the purpose of my being a Filipino. That is, because I am a Filipino, I am also a Catholic. Hypothetically speaking, had I been born anywhere else in Asia, I would likely not be a Catholic. Had I been born in the West, I would probably be a Catholic, but one swept by the ideologies ravaging its people today. And so, for all its cracks and faults, being a Filipino has also given me the gift of knowing Christ. And there is a joy and peace that comes only from knowing Christ. And I guess that makes it all worthwhile.